Resolve. In order to protect people's health, China should immediately stop all car production and confiscate all private cars. Our first argument says the world is in a climate crisis, and Chinese cities have some of the worst air pollution in the world, and all fossil fuels are contributing to this. Let me give you some evidence. The concentration of air pollution fine particles, called PM2.5, which lodge deep inside of the lungs, are very dangerous to human health. And we are talking about an amount that exceeds 18 times, according to the World Health Organization. So the number is exceeded 18 times. You may think that car production and use of car cannot really contribute to this huge pollution, but we would like to mention a case that when China banned 50% of privately owned vehicles for 2 weeks, there were reports of blue sky after a very long time, according to CNN September 4, 2015. Our first argument says that it's a national security issue and is the government's responsibility to protect its citizens from life-threatening situations. So we believe that the government has to take some precautions, has to improve public transport system and suggest new ways how to deal with this situation and limit the usage of cars. Thank you.
I think we can all agree with the previous speaker, Kate, that pollution is an enormous problem in China today. According to a recent UN report, 8 of the most polluted cities in the world, 8 of the top 10 most polluted cities in the world were Chinese. However, this isn't a problem which we can attribute to private cars. Rather, it is a problem with coal production. According to a New York Times article published in 2016, 366,000 premature deaths in 2013 were attributed to coal production. This was compared with only 137,000 which were attributed to transportation. Coal is responsible for 40% of the deadly fine particulate matter which is found in the air and produces pollution. So we can see that instead of going after cars and car ownership, the thing that we should be going after is coal, industrial, or coal which is used on an industrial level in China. My second argument is that if we begin confiscating cars and limiting car ownership, this is a violation of human rights. People should be able to decide for themselves whether or not to use a car. China, as we all know, has been on a democratic path for the last 30-odd years. It has been slowly democratizing. And by introducing this quite harsh measure, it would actually take China's democratic process back. It would reverse it by a good number of years. Thank you.
We all can appreciate the fact that China has a very big problem with air pollution. I think anyone is going to deny that. I think what the particular side of the debate that I am arguing for is going to prove is that the confiscation of all private cars is really a measure that is too harsh for the circumstances. I remember being in China in 2000 and walking around some of the cities there, and I was impressed with the level of industrialization and the level of technology that I found in the Republic of China. It was very impressive, and I was amazed by all that they were doing. With that kind of industrialization comes problems, comes issues that China is seeking to face and face it head on. In fact, according to a meeting that took place in Paris in 2015, China plans to clear their air by 60% of all the 60% of the pollutants in the air by 2020. And I think that kind of measure is an important one to keep in mind, that they are making progress in taking care of their air quality. Now, if I could address very briefly Kate's arguments. She mentioned two arguments. One was that there were particles that were lodging deep inside the lungs of people because of this pollution, and nobody is going to deny that kind of science. I'm not going to say that that is a false reality. But I would like to submit the fact that she mentioned that the government, again, was taking precautions to eliminate those kinds of things. And in fact, as she said herself, 50% of the private cars were not allowed on the roads, and they saw blue skies. And so I think, even in her example, she gives us the kind of moderation, really, that we're looking for in this particular debate. Secondly, the national security issue was brought to our attention. Again, I don't have anything to say against that. China is a massive nation. They have over 1 billion people in their republic. And to eliminate the use of cars, I think would be, again, too drastic of a measure to actually take care of the issue that we have in front of us. So with these kinds of things, I think it's important to remember that it's not the right move to confiscate cars in the Republic of China.
Okay. There are a lot of cars in China. First of all, there are a lot of people, but since 1994, the Chinese government has been increasing the amount of cars for its citizens. Before 1994, a typical Chinese person found themselves lucky to be able to afford a bicycle. However, since then, domestic car manufacturing has increased, and it has been reported that 96% of all Chinese people who have bought cars have paid cash for the car. It's becoming more and more practical to own a car, or possible to own a car for Chinese people. Actually, in 2015 alone, 23.85 million new cars were registered, making the total number of car ownership in China 172 million. It has been said that there are currently 111 cars per 1,000 cars in China, as opposed to America, where there are 825 cars per 1,000. Also, the car ownership is expected to double by 2030. So the problems with the air pollution caused by cars so far will just get worse. The number of cars per 1,000 people will not be the same as America, but there are only 320 million people in America total, and if they double, there will be 344 million people driving cars, registered cars, in China by 2030. A significant increase. I would like to respond to Tom's arguments earlier when he mentioned that coal was in fact the major source of air pollution in China. While coal is still the major source of energy at 75%, supplying 75% of all Chinese energy needs, it has been noted that in major cities, it is in fact car pollution that is the major problem these days. In the South, with fewer and smaller cities, the problem is still coal, it's true. But in the major cities where there are many more cars, car emissions are the major problem. He also mentioned that taking away people's cars is a violation of human rights. However, I would like to argue that fresh, clean air is a human right, and healthy lungs, cancer-free bodies, these are most certainly a human right.
China is already removing millions of old and environmentally unfriendly cars. In fact, in 2013, China removed 6 million cars that did not meet current emission standards, and they have plans to continue this policy to make sure that there are clean and reliable cars on the Chinese roads. Moreover, China is also actively restricting new car licenses, and in times of serious environmental crisis, when pollution in major cities like Beijing is particularly bad, which is a combination of both auto emissions and factory and other pollutants, China already actively takes steps to restrict the number of cars on the road. So first of all, I should say that my sources for this are the United Nations University and the Independent of London. Both of these articles were from 2015. Second, I would like to give a clear rebuttal to Latasha's arguments. First of all, unlike me, she did not give any sources for the statistics that she gave. So we cannot trust the information she gave without sources. Second, Latasha mentioned that since 1994, people could barely afford a bicycle, but now they are paying cash to buy a car. I do not consider this a crisis. I consider this an opportunity. Chinese people now can afford the luxuries that many of us have had for decades. This is not a crisis, this is progress. The fact that millions of new Chinese drivers are registering cars is again evidence of progress, not crisis. Now, as Latasha very poetically said, clean air is a human right. I agree. Clean air is a human right. Being able to own your own car is a human right and important for democracy. The protection of private property is an important democratic principle. But most importantly, even if we have millions of new Chinese drivers, it doesn't mean it's going to be in cars that cause pollution. As technology develops, cleaner burning fuels and electric cars will solve the problem of future pollution. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I want to first present another argument, a fourth argument, in support of this resolution. China used to be called the Bicycle Kingdom, and even today, China produces millions of bicycles. Last year, they produced 18 million bicycles, half of which were sent to the United States. China has lost its own cultural heritage by embracing Western vehicles and automobiles. You know, when I go to China, I want to see rickshaws. I want to experience something that is uniquely Chinese. I don't want to go to China and feel like I'm in Texas looking at the highways of Houston and Dallas. I want to see authentic Chinese. Bringing bicycles back to China by taking people's cars away will lead to bicycles being reintroduced widely in China, and this will give them more of a sense of connection to their very nice, calm past living with bicycles. Now, I want to respond to some of the things that the opposing team has said. First of all, you guys have been putting out numbers that, you know, China has confiscated 6 million cars. There are 1.3 billion people in China. 6 million cars is nothing. It's a very, very small percentage. And even though it's a big number, this is not going quickly enough. We are in a climate crisis. Military bodies around the world are saying that greenhouse gases and climate change is the number one security threat in the world. We have to take this more seriously. You guys are also have been contradicting yourself. On one hand, you say, oh, people have the right to, personal property. You're taking away people's cars. And then your third speaker just told me that one of the things China is doing is restricting people's right to have a driver's license. So, which is it? You either respect people's individual rights or you don't, right? And, the idea that this is evidence of progress is just, I think it's a very, very weak argument. Because what is progress? Progress should be something that brings people a better life, not a less healthy life. And as far as the coal issue goes, comparing coal to transportation exhaust, it's easy to solve energy problems. You can put up windmills, solar panels. You can't do this with transportation vehicles. So for these reasons, I think we need to support this resolution.
Firstly, I'd like to send a clear rebuttal to Taiko, the last speaker, and I'd say to her that if you insist on China supplying you with cozy cultural experiences of little Chinese people on bicycles, I suggest you visit Disneyland in Florida. This is a real country with real people that we're talking about. I'd like to send a clear rebuttal to Kate too. And I wonder, when you're giving the quotes about the reference to the blue skies, did you forget to mention that not only was it 50% of cars, but hundreds of factories were closed down too for those 2 weeks, which contributed to pollution levels coming down. So I think that it's clear that cars are not the problem here. In fact, they're a clear indicator that progress is being made in an emerging economy. Thank you.
We've heard a lot of arguments for both sides, but mostly what the negative part showed us, that they came up with some limitations, that we can work on restrictions, and that may help the situation. But I would like to point out that we are talking about 172 million cars, and this number should be doubled, as we heard from Latasha, by 2030. So we are talking about 2,400,000 cars, let's say. And Joshua mentioned that the number decreased by 6 million. What is 6 million compared to this huge number? And also we are talking that some people may have the access to have a personal car, some not. How would we choose these people? This can lead to serious troubles, can lead to discrimination, and a lot of other problems. So we don't believe that any restriction may help. We believe that it should be shut for everybody and no one should have the right to have a personal car.